Welcome to the North Group podcast. At North Group, we're constantly invited into organizations in order to influence leadership and organizational behavior. It is absolutely fascinating. I'm your host, Roger North, and we'd like to invite you into that conversation. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I don't know if it's morning or not where you're listening to it, but morning's my favorite time of the day, so I'm going to go ahead and say good morning. Good morning, Craig.
Good morning.
My guest this morning is Craig Schloniger, my good friend and partner, and we are continuing our series where we choose a common saying or idiom and we deconstruct it or dissect it a bit to decide the degree to which it's truthful, usable, and in particular applicable to the world in which we are engaged, which is primarily around organizational leadership and cultural development. So Craig, you and I chose "You can't teach an old dog new tricks." I don't even know if everybody even knows that one anymore. That's been around since I was a kid, which means it's got some mileage on it. What do you think about that? Why do people say that? Under what circumstances would people say you can't teach an old dog new tricks?
Yeah, it's a good question, Roger. And the reason this one came to my mind is I'm starting to wonder if I'm getting a little paranoid that I'm getting older.
Well, you are.
And maybe I might be that old dog. You know, especially when you look around and you see so many people that are younger than you are. Yeah. And so you wonder, how are people looking at me? Are they thinking I don't have the capacity to learn like I used to in the past?
So you're thinking that this really applies largely to our willingness to learn something new, maybe even our level of curiosity. Does that tend to diminish as we get older, that kind of idea?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if that diminishes as much as that we get into patterns of life. Mm-hmm. And we can even become more stubborn as we age because we've been through different periods of life working together and so forth. And so we have a way of doing things. And so then learning might seem to be harder, but it's more of a mental attitude than it is actually harder to learn new things.
Yeah, and it reminded me of another saying, which I'm just going to toss in here. Every once in a while, you'll hear somebody refer to another person who's got some age or experience or whatever it might be on them, and they'll say, "Oh, he's seen it all." Mm-hmm. Well, of course, we know that not to be true, and you and I have been engaged in this particular business and certainly in leadership for a long while. And I sure know I haven't seen it all, and I was reminded of that just Tuesday afternoon of this week in a conversation that I had with a client where it was just a situation that I was sorry to hear about it, but it wasn't one I'd seen or heard before. But anyway, back on this subject of learning, do you think that there is a tendency for us to desire learning less as we get older? Is that where this idea about old dogs and new tricks comes from?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a desire for learning less as much as it's hard to get out of our patterns of life or the ruts we get into. But it is an old saying, but I heard it in the last week.
Did you?
And so that's what also brought this to my attention. And it was in the context of, this one company, they have guys working out in the field, very talented guys out in the field, and they changed their technology, and they gave the guys in the field iPads to enter the information in. And some of the guys were struggling with the iPads, and right away the phrase came out, "Well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks." And it just hit me that, I don't know about you, Roger, but I have two parents that are near 80, and I have a father-in-law that's over the age of 80, and they're on Zoom, and they are using social media like Facebook to stay up to date with their grandkids.
How commendable is that? That's really commendable.
And they're learning these things. Now, it takes them time, but they've got it down, and they can learn it. Mm-hmm. And so I think with this phrase, what it really needs is a willing learner and a willing teacher.
Okay.
Working hand in hand together.
Yeah, it's interesting when the generations flip on that, because you probably experience this. You and I both have grown children, and they're advancing in life and doing well and those sorts of things. And there was a time in life when we were doing almost all the teaching. Mm-hmm. and we were hoping that they were doing some of the learning from the
Right,
teaching
right.
we were offering. Now it's certainly equal, at least, with my adult children, and I think in many cases I have more to learn from them than they might from me, or maybe the learning just fits in different categories. I'm not sure which. What are you thinking?
Yeah, and that's where we have to be open to take that learning or wanting to take that learning. But I think about our, leadership and how important it is for leaders of organizations to say, hey, we're going to adopt a new technology, but we are going to take the time to train and to teach this new technology instead of just dropping it on people or expecting people not to be able to learn how to use it, but to really to get into that teaching mode for these things.
And to accept that people are going to learn it at different paces with different amounts of enthusiasm, different amounts of aptitude. I mean, that's true with almost everything, whether
Sure.
you're teaching a young child to ride a bike or, your son's growing up to catch a ball or shoot a basketball or something. Some of them are more gifted than others, and that certainly is true in organizations.
Yeah, yeah. And you can even see how organizations evolve themselves in a learning pattern or adjusting. And it's kind of a resiliency thing of just how do we stay relevant as an organization that has been in business for many, many years. And I'd like to share a few examples
Yeah,
of
please
actually
do.
my clients
Sure.
that's really neat to see. One is Smucker and Sons. They've been in business for over 60 years now. And they could have just stayed right in the same path that they were before of being predominantly a roofing company. But then they expanded that into all of exterior improvement.
Okay.
And then about 20 years ago, they took a chance and went into laser cutting services.
Okay.
And that was to kind of smooth over the cyclical nature of the construction industry. But that is an organization that has decided we're going to keep learning along the way. And because of that learning, we got to change our organizational structure. We've got to maybe adopt new technologies and so forth.
Make significant capital investments if they went into that field, I would think.
That's right.
Yeah.
They have 3 laser machines right now. So
Yeah.
and I'm sure there's other things they tried that didn't work, but these are the 3 things that they learned and continue to adapt and move forward.
So what do you think? There's probably no existing organization that consciously 100% buys into this idea that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But what do you think happens when organizations and leaders desire for learning or wanting to move toward innovation or curiosity or anything, when that slows down, what happens? Or what's going on there?
Yeah, I think when that slows down, the curiosity factor goes away, and you just kind of do the same thing over and over again, which gets you through the day, and it might be the easiest path. But sometimes, our world shifts, and you're not prepared for that shift in the future.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things to do, and I even think about it in our own business, is say, we have a success pattern from a way of doing things, and much of that is produced by consistency or routine combined with a desire for continuous improvement. So
Yes.
we have processes here for leadership development and team development, organizational development, cultural development at North Group that we've used for 20 years. I'd like to think, and I hope, that people are experiencing them in a much improved, more educated, more innovative, more accessible kind of fashion than they would have 20 years ago, or hopefully even 2 years ago. But sometimes it doesn't feel that way to me because I'm using the same. Now, each conversation I have, I'm adding to my intellectual inventory, if you will, to help people forward. But I do wonder sometimes if a pattern of success diminishes our willingness to try other things.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a danger? And
I
do
think,
you see that?
Yeah, I think it definitely is a danger. But then, as we've even seen in the last year, how much everything has shifted.
Yeah.
And so you do have a pattern of success, and you stick with that pattern, and you make incremental improvements on that pattern of success. But you also have to be open to what changes can we make along the way. What have we learned, and how can we apply it in a different way just like at North Group, if you look back 20 years, Roger, we have a whole lot more services than we did 20 years ago.
That's certainly true.
And so that's taking what we do really well and applying it to other services.
So you hit on something there that is actually a belief that we have at North Group, and we're writing about these beliefs in our written blogs right now. But one of them, and I forget exactly how we're phrasing it now, but the idea is that sustainable change is normally incremental.
Yes.
Every once in a while, you get this maybe flash of brilliance and you immediately hop onto it. But for the most part, I think both on a individual level and an organizational level, that change is incremental. So in some ways, a leader's job, you and me leading an organization, we need to make sure that incremental change is occurring, and then it's adding value to our colleagues and adding value to our clients, and have some way to sense that we're delivering more value today than we did yesterday, because probably in our case, we're not going to flip our whole business model next week.
Yeah, right.
But we are getting better at it.
Yeah, I would think so. And I think if we're not getting better at it, then we've decided to stop learning.
Yeah, don't let us do that.
Yeah, and so, but definitely I think, and even when you bring new people into an organization, new talent in, that moves the organization forward, because they're bringing their past experiences, their skill set to the organization.
What are some of the practices that you use? I guess I would start with you personally, to stimulate learning and to avoid becoming the old dog that can't learn.
Yeah, reading is big for me.
Okay.
And reading, and not just reading things that I necessarily agree with.
Okay.
Or I'm already what I feel skilled at.
Yeah.
But really going out of that zone to read, to understand, to learn something new. And actually, Roger, that is one of my goals for this year, is to learn a new skill.
Wow.
I don't know. I don't know what it is.
You haven't identified it yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
And but if it means taking a class, or if I can do it online, whatever it takes. But I just want to learn something new this year, and to see how it goes.
I like that idea. I also like the idea that you just mentioned, and it should go without saying, but in society right now it probably doesn't go without saying, which is reading or investigating things that aren't exactly in line with what you already think.
Yeah.
Because so much of what seems to be happening right now is we talk with people who think like us, and we make comments to people who think like us, whether it's theological or business or political or whatever it might be. And all that does is reinforce us into more of a rigid way of thinking.
Yeah.
And if you would ask that same question back to me, I was thinking, I'm asking Craig this question about what is he doing to cultivate continuous learning. I'm thinking, how does that apply in my case? Well, reading would be a big deal for me as well. And I had a client who has mentioned the same book to me about 3 or 4 times. Roger, have you read? And each case I said, no, I haven't read it. And it was a book he told me it's a book on negotiation.
Yeah.
Well, there's something about that
Right.
that didn't really seem overly attractive to me, and so I just push it to the side. And of course, I get more recommendations on books than I can ever read. But about the 3rd time he mentioned it to me, I thought to myself, well, if only to be conversant and helpful to this client and respectful, I should at least order the book.
Yeah.
And
right.
I ordered the book, and now I'm a quarter of the way into it, and it's very different than what I thought it would be. And I think I've already picked up a couple of new ideas that actually may have some fairly direct applicability to every day, to what we do for a living and how we transact business.
And isn't that fun to read something, and all of a sudden you get kind of almost an aha moment?
Yeah,
of,
yeah.
Oh, wow, that does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And what works maybe in a different industry or a service offering, we can apply that learning to what we're doing.
Craig, I loved what you said as we kind of put this whole conversation back together. I love what you said about, was it your parents and your father? Is it your father-in-law?
And my father-in-law,
He's
yeah.
over 80.
Yeah.
Of course, I've met him. He's a very bright man, learned, and he's willing to use technology
Yes.
in order to, maybe he's motivated by staying in touch with his family or whatever that might be. And I think, too, of my in-laws. Carolyn's parents are just terrific as far as that's concerned. My father-in-law is going to be 89 here in a week or so.
Oh,
Looks like he's
wow.
about 72. But at any rate,
Fantastic.
they use technology on an everyday basis. And I don't know that they're necessarily motivated by technology, but they are motivated by staying current
Yep.
and understanding what's going on around them, and particularly by being able to stay in touch with their family and what their family is engaged in. And I just have a lot of respect for that, and I want to emulate that as we get older, because in some ways I feel like maybe my interests are getting more narrow.
Right.
And I think that's a little dangerous.
Yeah, and that's what Clint Eastwood said, never let the old man in. And so
Wow.
you get up every morning and you
Yep.
just don't let that old man
Yep.
in, and you just keep learning and taking it every day you can where you want it to go. And you're right, Roger, with that from a personal standpoint, but I do want to call out one industry, and that's the restaurant industry right now. They had to, in this past year, think of creative ways to learn how to do their business in a whole different way that they never expected. And if you think about the evolution in this last year of what they've done, first they were closed down, so they had to learn how to do takeout service.
Yep.
And after takeout services, they decided to set up tables in their parking lot
Yep.
so that they could continue to serve the public. And after they set up tables in their parking lot, it started to get cooler, and they put up heaters outside.
Yep.
These pillar heaters to keep guests warm so they could continue serving. And then something I never thought I would experience, and you and I experienced it together.
We did.
Is we ate in a plastic tent, a bubble outside
Yep.
with a propane heater, and it was actually a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
But just how they had to adjust on the fly, and I'm sure they tried some things and it didn't work, but they then found the formula to at least survive this period of time, and hopefully the dining rooms open back up again.
Great example of organizational change in that, and learning, and in that case, forced into it in some ways.
Yeah.
May we as leaders, organizational leaders, leaders of families and communities, not be forced into that, but cultivate an environment of continuous learning and curiosity, and not be accused of the old dog that can't learn new tricks.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Roger.
Thanks for listening to the North Group podcast. For more information about North Group Consultants, please visit northgroupconsultants.com.